Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about the yellow Tanjiro deck from Demon Slayer. This deck that we're going to be covering is my own custom build that I did use to win a tournament undefeated, and this was actually the deck that sealed me my final Rengoku winner card in my playset. So this is definitely an exciting and interesting deck, and it is very unique even among yellow Tanjiro decks. So if you're looking for a yellow Tanjiro deck that's a bit off the wall and one that has plenty of removal and stun effects, then you've come to the right place. As always, if you want to see the complete deck list, check out the link in my comments, or not in my comments, but in my notes section. This will also be on the podcast page as well as in my yellow Tanjiro guide. So this deck, just be warned, this is not the typical Tanjiro Nezuko raid deck. This is a bit different. It's more of a Tanjiro Hashira mashup, but it's quite strong, and I think it actually has, in some ways, has the ability to be stronger than the Nezuko version with more higher end power. So we'll be getting into all of this and more, starting with a deep dive into every single card in this deck, why it's included, and how it works with other cards to do well in the current meta. And then lastly, we'll be going over some of the matchups that I have faced in this deck and how they fare, so that you know how to use this deck at your own store tournament or even rare battle. If you are considering what deck to use in your Demon Slayer rare battle, I must say this would be a very solid pick. It is probably the strongest deck right now in the Demon Slayer format. So while it's not head and shoulders above the Demon Slayer meta, there are plenty of other strong decks in Demon Slayer. This is probably your most reliable and powerful deck. So without further ado, let's start with the zero cost Murata character. So this actually took me a little bit of time to settle on Murata. I went through a couple different versions of this deck, and one focused the Mitsuri zero cost character that you pay in action and she gains a ton of BP. That I liked that. That was intriguing to me. But ultimately, what I found is I don't usually have a situation where I want to pay an AP to make her a 4K character. Usually, if she's on the front line, just having her there to push is enough, and I don't need the BP. So I ended up cutting her. And I think that if you are running a Hashira deck, though, she is worthwhile including, because she does have that Hashira affinity, which gives her some added utility in those specific builds. In this deck, however, I went with the Murata because this deck does have that 5 cost Tokito, 4 copies of it, and it is a powerful card in this deck that you want to be playing as often as possible, but you don't run a ton of 2-gen characters, so there are situations where you may want to step that Murata back so you gain additional energy on the energy line. Additionally, Murata being in play does let you play a little more aggressively if you happen to get him out turn 1 or 2, because you can always rest with the notion that you could bring him back to play more characters if you need to. Of course, that's not guaranteed, because he could be hit by a special or something, but typically your opponent won't be wasting a lot of removal on your zero cost characters. So unless if you hit a special or something like that, he should be safe to pull back and then gain more energy. Another version of this deck I went full on with the 4 Nezukos, but I realized that, again, in the interest of balancing out your non-triggers, so for those not aware, you really want to be looking at around 8 non-triggers in your deck. That is the magic number. That means that you are using few enough that you are likely to hit triggers off of your life and gain momentum that way. But it also means that you're taking advantage. Having 8 means you are taking advantage of plenty of these powerful non-trigger cards. So it's not a mistake that some of these cards are non-trigger. It's because they are very powerful. Like a zero cost step character with 2000 BP. The thing that makes him balance is he doesn't have a trigger, right? So that's part of the balancing of this deck. But if you're using 8 non-triggers, it means you're probably taking advantage of a lot of the powerful cards that your energy color and strategy have to offer. So I do run 2 of the zero cost Nezuko. So this deck, while it's not focused on the Nezuko raid strategy, you do still have Tanjiros that benefit from having Nezukos in play. So it doesn't hurt to run a 2 of Nezuko just to ensure that you have a Nezuko on board. I think this is negotiable because this deck does run plenty of other Nezukos. You could, if you really like the Murata strategy, you could go with 2 more Muratas. Now the zero cost Obanai Iguro character, Again, might seem a little funny being in this deck because he's a Hashira. Seems like he might fit in a little bit better with a Hashira strategy. However, the single reason he's in this deck is again for that trigger balancing. So while he doesn't serve any purpose outside of being a 0-cost 2000 BP character, which is not bad, he does have a draw a card trigger. So draw trigger. So one thing that is useful with him, you can use him to block early on. So if you are not wanting your opponent to get an easy punch hit on you with a 1500 BP character, one good strategy is just to play Open Eye to your front line. Murata is a better character to do that with because you can step him back, but if you're not worried about your energy line, feel free to push that Open Eye or play him to the front line to defend your life early on from some of those pinch hits that can get you a little behind. Getting behind shouldn't be a huge deal with this deck because it's fast, but you never know. Now, moving on, we have the Nezuko Kamado character. Now, she's here largely because she's a Nezuko character and largely because she's a 1-cost character with a trigger. So I had played around with other cards, but this one just seemed to be the best fit. I prefer her over the 0-cost Nezuko because she does have the trigger. I don't typically use her effect. That switching effect just doesn't really come in handy too much in this deck, although you could theoretically combo it with your 3-cost Tanjiro to gain additional BP. However, you're probably not going to be playing that. She's mostly just here to help you make sure that you hit your curve, right? You want to make sure you have enough cards to build up your energy line, and she's another great option to do that. And she's a Nezuko character, which you need Nezuko characters in play. So that's the primary reason she's here. Moving on to number 2. Now, this Nezuko is here for more reasons than just having a draw trigger. She does have a powerful active trigger, which we know is a very strong trigger in this game. But more than that, she has a powerful win played effect. On top of the fact that she's a 2-cost character with 3000 BP, which makes her excellent for some early game aggression plays, she has a powerful win played effect that lets you lower opposing characters' BP by 1000 as long as they are over 1500 BP. So the main thing you're using Nezuko for is you're using her, A, she's a Nezuko character, and again, you unlock effects by having Nezuko in play, but B, she's really strong to combo with your 2-cost Tanjiro. So we'll talk about him now. When played, he is able to sideline a character with 3000 BP or less. So typically this wouldn't be the strongest removal in the world. However, he does have the color trigger, the yellow color trigger, which is my favorite color trigger in the game. This color trigger forces an opposing character to rest and stay rested. So it acts as both a defensive and offensive play, where defensive, you can survive a hit from a character, and then offensive, because that character is rested, you can swing through them on the following turn. Super solid trigger and my favorite in the game. But beyond that, if you combo him with Nezuko, you are able to remove 4000 BP characters with ease. So I say ease, I should say relative ease, because that requires having everything you need to pop the Nezuko and then pop the Tanjiro, and those are the only 2 cards you're playing that turn. But in return, you're getting 2 solid characters to your front line, and one of them is a 4000 BP character, and you're getting removal. So definitely worth pulling off. This combo is one of the reasons why yellow Demon Slayer is so strong, is this is your added removal. Typically, top tier decks have about 4 added removal in addition to their special. That's sort of like a minimum to be considered in the top tier. A lot of decks have more. This deck actually does have more, and if you consider the stuns, but that removal does elevate this deck a bit and put it above and beyond the other Demon Slayer decks currently available. Moving on, Shinobu is included in this deck. I don't think you'll typically see her in Tanjiro decks, but Shinobu is actually a really strong card. She works really well without, you don't even have to think about putting her in a Hashira build, but in this deck, you're not going to use her combined total, use all effects in this deck. You're not going to have those 6 Hashira on the play, unless if for some reason you do, which is great, but you probably won't. But what she does is she gives you versatility and choice. That's a rare situation in Union Arena right now. We don't have a lot of cards in Union Arena that lets you choose between multiple effects, but when played, you can use her to draw a card. You can use her to switch a character to resting as long as it's 3000 BP or less. This is actually another thing you can use. You can use Shinobu to rest a character after playing the Nezuko if you want to. You can lower a character by 1,000 and then switch them to resting. This is not like the yellow color trigger or like the Tokito we'll get into in a moment. That character doesn't stay resting the next time it would switch to active, but it does enable you to punch some holes in your opponent's defenses. You can also finally boost a character by 1,000 BP. This could be handy in some situations where you want to hit through a 5,000 BP character or something like that. Not bad to have all of these options. Just make sure you think about her, because I tend to play her as mostly a draw card because yellow doesn't have a ton of draw. But just remember to always keep in mind you can choose any one of those effects when you play her. So moving on to Tengen Uzui, a very solid character. He has a draw trigger, which is one of the reasons he's in here. He's got step, which means you can move him in and out very easily of the front line. And then, of course, very importantly, he has the 2 energy gen. So that's very necessary to build up to Tokito, and that's why he's in here. Just to make sure you can hit that Tokito with more ease. You do have 2 of the Tanjiro Kamado 3 costs. You won't be using his during your turn boosting BP very often, but what he is good as another fallback to energy gen, just making it easier to hit your characters, especially that Tokito, and he also can act as a raid target for the star of the show, which is your Tanjiro Kamado raids. Speaking of, let's talk about your Tanjiro Kamado raids. This deck that I play actually runs 4 of the starter deck Tanjiros, so I don't think that that's a hard and fast rule. I think you should play around with it and try out, but I think the Tanjiro Kamado raid that's not from the starter deck, I think he is better in the more Nezuko focused build, right? Because in that build you are really recycling Nezuko's. Nezuko's really key to that strategy. She's less key in this deck, so I have found running the 2 of Tanjiro is fine. He is really nice because he has that impact. So if you play him, have a Nezuko, you get a free character on the field to help swarm your opponent. But even more importantly, he keeps that that impact past the turn he's raided. Whereas the other Tanjiro loses the impact at the start of your next turn. So, but on the flip side, the Tanjiro Kamado starter deck raid character gains 500 BP and impact until the start of your next turn. So what that means is that you can play this Tanjiro and then use him to block opposing attacks. That's super relevant in a meta that has a lot of 4,000 BP attackers, right? So you can use Tanjiro to block a Gurren force block. That's a fantastic use case for this Tanjiro character. You can use him to just survive anything that's not a 5,000 BP attacker or 4,500, which there's not very many 4,500 attackers. But you can use him to survive a lot of attacks, and I have done that often. So I think he's just a more useful character. You could potentially swap the numbers count on these, and you could even run, 4 of each. It's up to you. Play around and try it out. I do like the 4-2 that's worked for me, but again, play around and try out what works for you in your strategy. And finally, we do have the water breathing special and the total concentration breathing. Those are staples in any yellow build. But the Tokito is the secret sauce of this yellow Tanjiro Demon Slayer deck. I can't imagine playing yellow Demon Slayer and not playing Tokito. He is just so strong. He doesn't need to be rated. He simply is a 2-action character. You play him and you switch a character to resting and they stay resting the next time they would switch to active. That is very strong. That essentially takes your opponent's strongest character out of the running for an entire for about basically 2 whole turns. And even more than that, when he is sidelined, you get to rest an opposing character. So this works just like the Nanami, without having to discard cards from your deck. This works just like the Nanami from the blue Sukuna build. And it's a very fantastic defensive technique to stay alive a turn, to basically prevent your opponent from doing a lot of shenanigans. So Tokito is a must in this deck. I run 4 of these Tokitos in this deck. So that's all the cards in the yellow Tanjiro custom build that I have. Let's look at some of your matchups. So first of all, versus Blue JJK, really not a problem for this deck. You are not having to get through any 5k characters, and you can use your powerful combination of removal and stun to deal with Sukuna. So I think you're a little bit faster on the lower end than Sukuna because you don't have to deal with getting the fingers in your sideline. So it's a pretty strong matchup for you. It's not, I wouldn't say you're massively advantaged, but you're definitely not disadvantaged against Sukuna. Lancelot can definitely be an issue. So here you're going to be leaning heavily into your Tokitos, so that way you can stun your opponent's Lancelot 5k characters if they get them out. Or are going to have to use some of your BP reduction effects or BP enhancement effects to get through those 5ks. But your one biggest advantage against Lancelot is that you can quickly rush your opponent, and you should look to do that. Really look for the aggressive play against Lancelot. There's no downside to doing that, because once Lancelot, as always, gets built up, he's much harder to deal with. So, moving on to Bleach Purple. This is a relatively even matchup. Actually, these decks are kind of similar in their love of removal. I often talk about this Tanjiro custom build as something of a mashup between Bleach Purple and Green, Bleach Green Toshiro. It has the stun that Toshiro offers, as well as a lot of the removal that Purple offers. It's not quite as heavy on the removal and as Bleach Purple, but it's still a solid deck, and you can certainly rush down your opponent. I think it's a little less reliant on an energy line than Bleach Purple, so you can get a little bit of an advantage there if you rush early. I think the last matchup that I would cover is the matchup against Code Geass. Again, I mentioned already that 4500 BP with the boost that you get from Tanjiro, as long as you have Nezuko in play, is very effective at stopping that force block from Gurren. And that's not really something to be taken lightly, because that Gurren force block is one of the strongest plays in the game. So having this ability to block that with this deck that otherwise is a 4k BP deck is super strong. So just again, make sure to have your Nezuko in play when you raid that starter deck Tanjiro, and you should be a lot better off. So lastly, I think there's one more matchup to look at, which is the I think if you're looking at a rare battle, you should be good against. Really, you should have a decent edge on Purple, Demon Slayer Purple. I do like Demon Slayer Purple, especially the Gyutaro build. That can come out fast and hit hard, but you have more removal than that deck does, so you should be okay. Just watch out for the Enmu, the 4500 Enmu, because you won't be able to remove him terribly easily with the combo of Tanjiro and Nezuko. And then Demon Slayer Red. I've had a surprising amount of difficulty against Demon Slayer Red. I did win this matchup, but Demon Slayer Red can be something of an issue, because they're able to quickly advance a bunch of really strong characters to the front line. So against this deck, you just have to be watching your tempo, make sure you're keeping the pace with life, and lean into the fact that you just have better removal. That's really what's going to win you that matchup, is Red Demon Slayer doesn't really have any removal. So again, in this game, card removal, like in a lot of games, is the king. So Yellow Tanjiro, especially with the Tokito, has a ton of removal and stuns. So you're looking pretty good as long as you know how to use your cards. And if you've listened to this and read the article on my website, chances are pretty good that you know how to use this deck. So that's everything on my custom Yellow Tanjiro Demon Slayer deck. Hope you enjoy, and I'll see you next time.